Hello everyone and welcome to another day in GoGodotJam. And as you all know, in this session we have something special. We have Nathan from GDQuest coming for an interview because of course we have a lot of questions about Godot and about games. So I think he is one of the right person to ask what are those some tips and some tricks. And other than this, if you don't know what GoGodotJam is, then you can check our website. It's GoGodotJam.com. It's a jam that has also events happening all around. So you might check that one because it's really cool. And you have already over 700 participants. So if you haven't signed up yet, then yeah, you should because it's going to be awesome. Okay, with that said, let's go. By the way, if you don't hear me or you have issues, please do tell in the comment section because I'll be watching it nonstop. We'll also get questions from the chat, and let's get started already. What are we waiting for? And I want to introduce you. Probably you all know him already. So okay, we're on.
Hey everyone.
Yay.
Been a while.
Yeah.
Since the last live.
Yes, so we are live. So yeah, probably already people that interactive with Godot in one or another way, they know about you because if you just search for Godot tutorials, one of one of the first results is GDQuest, and yeah, this whole you have free tutorials. You also have paid courses and a lot of other stuff. You're contributing to the open source community a lot. With a lot of documentation, and that's really great. I've checked some, but yeah, I would let you talk and say a couple of words. Mostly, yeah, just in a tweet kind of format, because I think people know already.
Yeah, so Nathan, I'm GQuest's founder. We help people become game developers, initially with free and open source software, and today with Godot. So that's what I do. I teach Godot for a living.
Nice. That's great. But yeah, you just a quick question because I'm super curious. You started your YouTube channel with tutorials for Krita, and then you moved to Godot. And why Godot and not Unity or Unreal? I mean, probably back then, also they were the biggest game engines. So why did you pick Godot?
That's the whole open source, free and open source software thing. I picked Krita initially because there was a lack of content for it, and it was a promising project. And Godot was the same. Unity, of course, is proprietary. Unreal Engine source available, but still same thing. Like it's owned by a large company, and it seems my camera went down.
Yeah, it went down a little, but voice still works. So
okay, great.
It's
so
the camera is still down.
Yeah, I'm having some issues. I'm going to turn to my webcam and okay, let's see if that works.
Yeah,
okay.
It works.
It's a different view, lower quality, but I guess I'll just do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, no problem.
The phone turned down. Okay, so going back to Godot, it's just from the very start, I could see that it was a really promising project and program led by someone who had a lot of experience making game engines. And the whole point of GDQuest, this adventure, has been to support these kinds of projects. Unity and Unreal, they don't need so much external help because these companies have a huge budget. Now both billion-dollar companies. It's a whole different mindset when you look at how Godot is made. It's more, how could I say, handcrafted, if you want. It's more like indie game creation, but indie engine creation, if you want. So I wanted to support that.
Yeah, this is kind of my path as well because I have a lot of years of Unity, and when I saw Godot lacks a lot of like marketing and other stuff so that people can really understand what's going on, like what are the real differences, like the workflow differences. And one way to do this was, of course, creating the whole GoGodotJam thing, and not just jam because we already have jams and they're really good. but something that actually tries to create awareness for people that are using different engines, and like strengths and weaknesses for each of the engines, and compare them kind of. So this is also what GoGodotJam is targeting. So what is your opinion about the GoGodotJam actually?
Honestly, when you first contacted me, of course, you sent me an email and it hadn't started yet. So in those cases, I wait a bit to see what people do because, multiple persons talk about creating projects, but don't necessarily commit. Nothing personal, of course, it's just, you don't know people. But when I saw how you organized it, honestly, I must say it's exactly what we needed. So something that brings creators together, that brings lots of persons who are, you have some teachers, you have some game creators, etc., all coming together to every day sharing their love of Godot, their insights, their tips. And I think it's really good. As you said, there was the Godot Wild Jam, for example, which is really nice as a game jam. But we have the Godot conventions, but we don't have other events that keep the hype up and keep the community activity up for Godot online, especially during those times of coronavirus, where the local meetups, are not happening as much.
Yeah, I think it's kind of tough times right now, but it also enables us to have to gather all of these community for. I mean, in the chat right now, there are people from all over the world, and it would be if you would create like a local event somewhere. Most of the people that are joining right now could not have been, for example, let's say in one place or another, because of various reasons, of course, because of the restrictions or because of lack of money. Yeah, because it was a tough time for everyone in this period. So yeah, it's good that it's a virtual event and we can gather everyone that is interested to provide yeah, quality content, I hope, that people can enjoy and bring value to the community. Okay, with that said, let's dive into the big question and like the elephant in the room, because people already started to ask, and I have this question in my top priorities from the list. So what do you think about Godot 4? I mean, what is your expectation? Do you have some insights, some hidden stuff that it's not publicly known, or something that you can reveal? I don't know.
Something to reveal? No, not so much. Compared to many persons watching, of course, in the team, we follow the development very closely. Sometimes we contribute as well. So what I can say from Godot 4 is it's another big step in the right direction. Of course, from the outside, you guys see all the new features that are coming. But what I'd like to point out is that the developers' communication and organization has improved. The whole process and project feels more and more professional now. It keeps some of that indie, sometimes we say amateur approach, but not in a negative sense, which is the very organic process of open source projects that make them so efficient and that make them grow so fast when they grow like Godot. But for me, that would be the highlight. I think it's also the devs are taking the opportunity to fix many core problems. So you see the big new features, the 3D rendering, but there's a ton of work on fixing all the little annoyances that you have with Godot 3, all the little inconsistencies, all the old functions that have a weird name and those kinds of things, which will, you might not see it as much, but you will feel the difference, I think, working with Godot 4, thanks to all that.
Yeah, and this is really reassuring for a lot of people that hear this, because I've heard a lot of questions. Oh, Godot has problems of a couple of years old. I mean, I checked myself. I checked the GitHub repository to see the issues, and there are issues from a couple of years old. But what people don't understand is the team was really small, and it's really hard to tackle everything. And if you just fix small issues and you tell people, hey, I got that fixed and got that fixed, it doesn't have this marketing buzzword, like, for example, oh, we have this new Vulkan renderer, for example. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of juggle with them and at the same time fix stuff. And but having this strong project management, I think it's a plus. And one other thing that I wanted to ask you, because yeah, God of War is going to be released, but it's just by releasing it and adding so much stuff, of course the documentation needs to be heavily updated.
Yeah.
And I know that you are a heavy contributor to that documentation, and you also wrote some guidelines for that as well. So that's really great. So what is your plan? Are you going to contribute to this version, or are other people involved?
No, for now, one thing I could say, like exclusivity, is that I got an offer to work more regularly on the documentation, to be part of the team, like longer term contract. The problem is I just don't have the time. So that's why during the last mission I had on the documentation, there was so much work on the guidelines, on cleaning them up, making it much easier for people to contribute, at least making the process clearer. It's to share some of that knowledge and help train new people work on the documentation. I think there are persons who would be more suited to doing that because I have a team to manage, the channel, the courses, etc., which don't belong to the documentation. And on the docs, you really need someone who will spend a very long time, a lot of time, work on the small technical details, right? Because another thing with documentation, and the reason I prefer to focus on GDQuest right now, is that it doesn't get as much visibility. Unfortunately, it's absolutely necessary. The teachers, the tutors, experienced development teams will look into the documentation, but many users just go to videos first, or go to YouTube, or go search on Google and take the tutorials before the manual. So the manual is often, that's what we say in software, that it's for the people who teach, right? It's the team leads, of course, it's for everyone. But when it comes to game development, you see that with Unity as well. It has a really great documentation, and people go to courses and tutorials, and the teachers who make those courses and tutorials are the ones who read the manual from start to finish. And of course, some professionals, some persons, right? But I'm talking in terms of volume here.
Yeah, actually, when I started Godot, I went through just through the manual and like everything, like every single point in there, I went through that. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I found some small issues as well, and I wondered how can people, like, if someone finds some errors, how can they report, or what's the easiest way to report them? So
okay, that would go to the Godot engine / Godot-docs repository on GitHub and open a new issue. And I think then we have a template to help them, to help guide them. Like if this is the built-in code reference, it will send them to one place, or at least tag the issue. And for the online manual, the rest of the documentation, like the more regular articles, then it will be a bit different. But you just report the issue the best you can, and contributors will ask you. You just have to consider or keep in mind that right now there's no one working actively full-time or close to full-time on the documentation. So the available work time is very limited.
Yeah, I understand. But yeah, probably it's for more advanced uses. So the YouTube, though, you know what the problem with having YouTube tutorials is, for example, now I've heard that GDScript got a lot of changes, and for beginners especially, if you start to implement something and like you start a tutorial and it's a couple of years old and it breaks like from the first line that you implemented, then you probably quit that tutorial and find a newer one. So that's kind of like a balance that needs to be achieved. Yep, and there's also questions from the chat. Someone, Neil O'Brien, is asking, is Godot good as a first open source project to contribute as a student developer?
Yeah. Honestly, I would say clearly yes. Having looked at multiple open source projects and contributed to some, what you will find with Godot. Okay, I will say one thing: the development team is overwhelmed with pull requests, so you're not guaranteed to get your work merged quickly unless you work directly with them from the start. So you find a small issue, a bug you can fix in the bug tracker, or you go to the Godot chat and ask, like you say, here are my skills. What can I say? What can I do to help? I have X hours per day or something like that, like to put in the project. And some contributors will direct you to issues and try to work with them. That's a tip to get your stuff reviewed and merged quickly. Try to work with them saying, can you, if you have a Hugo Lorcio or Giroudier or a specific contributor who's responsible for one area of the program, and if they can kind of mentor you, right? You ask them, I want to invest that much time. What can I do? Can you look at my work? And if you build that relationship, it will help them they know what you are working on. So it's very quick for them to review, so they can get it merged quickly, perhaps, in return. So yeah, I would go to the Godot Engine developers chat, which is linked on the official website in the community tab, and just get in touch with people. Godot is great to contribute to as a first project if you know C++, of course. Because of the community and the whole development mindset, they are very open to contribution. They are fairly reactive. Pull requests lingering for a long time with open source projects is completely normal. It's because it takes lots of time to do code reviews, and there are many more persons contributing than there are people available for code reviews. It's that simple. So that happens with many projects. You unfortunately have to go through it, but great learning experience, and the way Godot's devs communicate is really good as well. Like, they are very welcoming and all. It's not the case for every open source project. Sometimes people, you can look, I can talk about that one. Nothing wrong with that, but the Olive video editor, like lead developer, is states on the repository that basically don't contribute if you don't know what you're doing. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it's like, I don't want contributors. Probably the work he's doing is very technical, very complicated. So he kind of pushes away contributors. Like, unless you know what you're doing, like, just don't even contribute, basically. So the mindset can be very different. That's what I want to point out.
Yeah, but I think if you are into game development and you want to contribute to open source projects, for example, don't go to Blender, because they already have a lot of money. They already have a lot of support. Don't go to other big things. Go to Godot, because Godot is small right now and it definitely needs a lot of help from us all. And then hopefully other companies will start using it and will start getting heavy money so that they can grow the team and create a solid project.
Regarding Blender, actually, having experience being part of the community and all, the ambience of Blender is quite different. It's not bad by any means, but it's much more professional right now. And so when you contribute, it's really, they might just shut down your patch, like reject it very easily. It can be a bit more difficult to talk with the developers. The code bases can be harder as well, because it's C for the most part. Some parts of the code base is really old, but Godot, the feel is very different. Sometimes the developers can be assertive and everything, like it's just human communication, but overall it's friendlier. I think they will be nicer even if they reject your work. They'll explain why, etc. Much more.
Okay. Duke Magus asks, how viable is to use Godot as the main tool to develop non-game products?
I think so. Let's say mobile apps, apps with an interface for desktop, etc.
Yeah.
On desktop, it's really good. I would say it may depend on the kind of app you're doing and experience. If you know how to use a UI framework like Qt, you might go with it. But I would say it's really good, honestly. You have projects like Material Maker being made in Godot. So Substance Designer like procedural texturing tool. It's running very well. You have the pixel art drawing program Pixelorama, and people really achieve a lot in little time with Godot. The language is very simple. So I've seen already successful apps with that. On mobile, I've seen one or two, but smaller applications. I have a teammate who works in web and does apps like these, and he was actually a senior developer, really experienced, and he was saying, yeah, after seeing what I did, I want to try with Godot as well, because really the UI stuff and all works really well. And I saw a few persons say that you have a low processing mode feature you can activate in your project settings that make the app not constantly redraw like a game. So you can save battery and performance with that. And it's designed specifically to make editors, applications, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. Also, I've heard the news that Tesla is hiring Godot developers, and that's for real. Like
Yeah.
I've actually checked it myself because I was wait a second. They're not hiring Unity devs, Unreal devs. No, they hire Godot devs to make the interface for their cars in Godot. So yeah, if Tesla uses Godot for some parts of the interface in their cars, that's crazy. I mean, and still Elon Musk doesn't want to contribute to the project. Would be nice to.
I think it's probably it's like they say, we'd like you to have different skills, and Godot would be part of that. Probably they're evaluating their options. The thing with Godot is being free and open source, and you have the ability to make a lightweight export, and you have the ability to iterate very quickly. You know that engines like Unity and Unreal are very much used in the automotive industry, right? In architecture for Unreal, these are very big markets. And so they have a need for, they use game engines for, I don't know if they use them for simulation, but at least might use them for some kinds of interfaces and all. For demos as well, rendering demos. Godot being free and open source and allowing you to do a lightweight export might be very good for them. They can customize the renderer, they can optimize whatever they need for their specific needs. They have engineers in-house do that, so it can be, very nice for them.
Yeah. Cool. Let's get back to the questions list. I wanted to ask you, what Godot 4 feature do you want the most?
Okay, for me, it's not one of the sexier, most visible ones, even though it's GDScript 2. It's the remake of the language, redesign of the parser and everything. I think it's one of the most impacting changes for us developers. So even if rendering and all is great, we spend a lot of time scripting. And GDScript currently has some core limitations. The main one is the type checker. It's there, it's nice, but it's not complete. And having the thing just work a step further, removing that annoying circular reference error that you get currently is going to help with our daily productivity. So it's because I think it's going to have the most impact on our work hours and our productivity in Godot 4.
And the courses that you are preparing right now, are they going to be targeted towards this GDScript 2 or for the current version?
No, for the current version, because Godot 4 is a long ways off. And even, if you followed Godot's development from the start, the major releases, Godot 3, it took until probably Godot 3.1 to fix some of the core issues. Oh. So we'll update. What we're doing is we're targeting what's stable and people can use and learn right now. And all the things you learn always translate to Godot 4. We'll give you a guide to say, here are the differences, of course, as soon as Godot 4 is out, if you want to follow tutorials with Godot 4. But as for making complete version for Godot 4 of the courses, we'll do it, but we'll wait for Godot 4 to be completely stable, to test everything, to ensure that people don't have too much trouble. So we're looking to update the courses when Godot 4 is out.
Oh, nice. So are you looking to like backwards update like the courses or create new ones or both?
No, update the courses we have, but like do very serious updates. If there are videos, to remake all the videos that are necessary. We have some courses that are text-based, so we'll be redoing all the code. And if you want, what's important with that is, for example, if we decide to start work on that for a given course, a recent one is 2D Secrets, it's text-based. We need to rework all the open source demo projects that we use for that. And we need, if we have new features in Godot, we want to also improve the code based on the new possibilities in Godot. So we'll have to do a lot of rewrite and all. So we'll keep the 3.x series and add the 4.0 series to our users.
Okay. And people that, this is a side question, people that have bought the courses for the 3.x version, will they get the update, or they have to buy like an upgrade?
No, we do always lifetime free updates on our courses.
Okay, so they get a free update included basically in the price that they paid for the course when they got it initially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's very often what happens when we do a Kickstarter or something like that. We start at a price that's a bit lower. So people get it, they go through the early access experience, so they get content little by little, etc. There might be a few typos here and there, a few bugs, like that happens when you produce a course. But they get a lower price, and later when we finish the course, we increase the price. But for them, it's just they paid maybe 30%, 50% less.
It's like an early access game, basically. So if you buy games on Steam early access, then you get the game, and then you get the, of course, if people don't release DLCs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's great to hear. I think a lot of people that bought your courses will have a great time knowing that they are covered when Godot 4 stable is getting released. Okay, and with that, actually, a small announcement for people that don't know. Nathan contacted me a couple of days ago and offered some prizes in forms of courses. So we will do some prizes, maybe with a little trick involved. So stay tuned for more information about that. But I just wanted to point that out in case you don't know.
For the jam winners,
Yeah, for the jam winners. And we do have a little spin-off to that, which I really liked. I thought about that idea. So participate. Try to participate because it's going to be a nice time.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your number one advice for people that are just starting game development?
Okay. So let's say the advice will be different for people who are completely new to programming, or people who, like you, are experienced and come from not like you, people who come from software development, web development, because getting to a new world like game development is different, from your day job, even if you're a programmer in the first place. I'll go with people who are fairly new to programming first. The main things I can recommend, if you have the opportunity, is a local class. Right now, it can be an online class, but something where you're part of a group of people, you have a teacher to help you. If you can find a good one, that's the best way to learn, because you'll have support as you learn, etc. Of course, there are lots of resources available online. And the one thing we recommend in the official documentation, but Kids Can Code, and I recommend that, is that currently we don't have a complete programming course to learn programming with Godot, right? So that's a bit limiting. And when you get started, a game engine like that can be overwhelming, because there are lots of things that magically work, but that assume that you have experience programming. So what I recommend, at least, is if you want to learn to make games right now, you can follow tutorials, you can follow free courses. We have a getting started course that's free for Godot. There are others like the ARPG series from Heartbeat that is great, but the course is from Kids Can Code. But you want to learn you want to work on your programming foundations on the side. It's an investment. It might take you a few dozen hours to go through all the basics, but it's really important. It's going to save you dozens and dozens of hours of headaches later working with the engine. So I recommend you do an hour of programming basics and 1, 2, 3 hours of Godot, and you work on both side by side. There's an excellent course to do that, which is the Harvard CS50. This is their introduction to programming, a full semester free from the Harvard University. So it's really top notch. They show you things like physically how memory works, how the computer works, and everything, and you get to see multiple languages. And what's most important is they teach you to think like a programmer. So very early on, they tell you about things like, how do I solve problems? How do I approach, I'm stuck with something. How do I approach solving it? And I break it down. I can use this technique. I can use rubber ducking, etc. All the things you will learn in that course. It's very entertaining. It's completely free, open source, even the tools they use. So much recommended. CS50. So that's what I would recommend to get started. Being part of a group, learning, like brushing your programming foundations and learning Godot in parallel. This will maximize your learning speed. So you will save time doing that. I say that because every day we see people who get stuck again and again and again. And we have young people from all over the world who try to learn Godot directly, and they follow tutorials and they don't really understand what they are coding. They don't manage to make their games and they get frustrated.
Yeah.
Okay, when it comes to more experienced developers, you're coming from web development, from software development. I think you can get started straight with Godot, with the Getting Started series of the official documentation. Some parts might be a little slow for you, but the important part is it jumps really quickly into the concepts that you need to understand how Godot works. And as a developer coming from other fields, the main thing you want to understand with game development is the concept of the game loop and constantly polling for input. So you are not waiting for events. You are not waiting like to get a signal or something like that, but there's a loop constantly running 60 times per second. And that's how you update your program state for the most part. But that's about it. I think you can jump like looking at code, looking at this Getting Started series and go from there. The official documentation is pretty good for experienced developers, I think.
Yeah, I think these are some great advice that you provided here, and a lot of I see myself a lot of people struggling with stuff because it's a common trend now to go to YouTube videos, just pause on the full code page, copy paste it, or ask directly GitHub link, and then copy paste the code, and of course something is not working or something is not updated, and then they complain in the comment section that the tutorial is wrong or something. So invest the time to learn programming, or at least the basics of it, because game development is really challenging as is. So getting stuck every single second, it will deter a lot of people from creating finalized games in the end.
And we want to work on adding some resources for people to learn game development with Godot. We'll talk about that at the GoGodotCon. We have a presentation coming for that. So we're making some things so you don't necessarily have to go through that Harvard CS50 course to get started, and you can get started straight with Godot. We're building tools, etc. Funding is not secured yet, but we're working on that. There's the question in the chat, complimentary from the Nervous Beehive, about, do you know any good intermediate courses? All the intermediate courses, like the complete ones, are paid courses. We make some. There's one from Heartbeast as well, and from Canopy Games. I think they have for online multiplayer.
Yeah.
For multiplayer for free, there is the tutorials from, how is it called? Game Development. From Stefan Gamedev. So pretty good one. But yeah, the real complete intermediate level courses are paid courses. So we have one called Godot 2D Secrets that has lots of different types of games. And Heartbeast, I think his Metroidvania course falls in that category as well.
Yeah, we have some back questions as well from the top, of course.
Okay.
This is our Mr. Liptip. So both of these are kind of related because they are about the revenue sources. So Mr. Elliptic asks, is the courses your main source of revenue for GDQuest?
Yes. Right now, if you include the Kickstarter campaigns, so basically right now we do, I did a few Kickstarters, and these are like pre-sales of the courses, and then we keep selling the courses. So yeah, they are pretty much the only source of revenue right now.
Okay, and Duke Mega says, have you thought about using NFTs to sponsor the future courses?
NFTs is a tricky one. I don't know if someone would take like virtual ownership of the course. I totally see why it happened for art. Even if it's currently a bubble, it also solves an actual problem or need that some people have. Someone pointed out it's not great for the environment. It's something I care about, so I wouldn't go into NFTs for that. I understand why some other people do it. For some artists, it is, a source of revenue. People talk about that environmental thing. It's true, it uses a lot of energy. At the same time, for example, I just want to say that because I see people going after artists. If an artist sells a piece for $2,000 with an NFT, it emits, like the estimates are around 30 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions from the energy used. If they sell prints, like enough prints that they send throughout the world for the same amount of money, it's going to have a much higher environmental impact. So you have to consider that, because I see people who just say, it's bad for the environment, and who jump at artists like, I hate you, I'm going to, like, some artists got death threats for using NFTs and those kinds of things. That's a bit extreme. Like, if you look at the numbers, it depends on the case. As with many things related to the environment, completely depends on the case. So yeah, it's not something I've thought of, and I don't think I would do it, because these technologies, while interesting innovations, have that problem of the energy cost, which is can be a bit wasteful.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, probably stick to Kickstarter as pre-selling. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, now it's with the 2020, like a lot of the airplanes kind of reduced the CO2 emissions, so that's great. Of course, people stopped traveling, that's why. But on the good side, yeah, the planet healed a little, so to say. But yeah, we have more questions. So Neil O'Brien asks opinion for 3D in Godot.
Yeah, there are two persons asking for that.
Yeah.
I can say there are some little quirks, let's say, on the rendering side, right? And that's why Godot 4 is coming, and there are more improvements needed. In particular, I would say for me, having done a bit of Unreal before Godot, I worked as a designer, and I worked with the Unreal Development Kit back in the day. The level editing tools are very limited with Godot, so right now you have to rely more on Blender if you want to really be efficient with level editing, I would say. The workflow tools can be a bit limiting. The code side, using GDScript for 3D, if you've done 3D with other engines and you've coded in them, it's really nice. So I've seen some people struggle because in the examples, especially, there are old examples that have been made by Juan, the lead developer of Godot, and he's he's very knowledgeable about math, and also he'll just use matrices and the things that exist in Godot, but you don't need to use that. You can write fairly simple 3D code to get stuff done in Godot, and it's very nice. So I really like that part, and I'm looking forward to seeing performance, rendering performance, and optimization, depending on the kind of game, can be really problematic. So if you wanted to make an open world right now in Godot 3, you would have to customize the engine to add some performance optimizations. But in Godot 4, thankfully, the key ones will come out of the box, which is really important. But for some games, like I've seen someone make a real nice Android games, and the field of view is restricted. You have a ship and you go through corridors and all. And in those cases, it can really run well.
I see. Yes.
So
Should people that are working right now on 3D games, should they continue working on them, or should do like 2D games and just wait for Godot 4 and then continue on those?
no, the thing is, it depends on your skill set right now. If you want to do 3D in Godot at the moment, you need to have, I would say, a good amount of experience with game development, because you're going to need to figure out the workflow, create some tools for yourself, something like that. So it depends. I would just tell people to like try it out, do a benchmark for your game, so you make the kind of scene that you want visually, like you stress test the rendering engine on your lowest target hardware, and you see what you get. If your game is, you might think your game is really complicated, but maybe rendering is not a problem. You can see games like GDQuest in 3D being made for Godot, lots of meshes and all, but you have kind of that top-down camera that makes it so rendering is not much of an issue. You don't have to have mountains rendering 3 kilometers away in the distance.
Expansive worlds.
Yeah. So if that's the case, Godot's rendering might just do the job, and get started right now. You have to always try the engine and the tooling for your projects. It's something that I understand the wish for people to just use an engine and do everything with it. But you have to consider in games that game engines are different. You mentioned it at the start of the interview. They have strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. And you might want, depending on the project, to use different engines as well, right? This is very important. Godot is designed for relatively small teams. So if that's your case, it's pretty good, right? But maybe 3D for a solo developer can work, can be a bit tricky. Again, depends on your situation.
Yeah, and also not only game engines, and the next question would be regarding the languages even inside Godot, because someone is asking in the chat, I don't know how to pronounce the name because it's written in Cyrillic. Is the future of visual scripting is the future of Godot, or should they stick with GDScript or C#? I would even ask GDScript or C# as well, not only visual scripting, but let's start with visual scripting.
Okay, visual script, it's not there yet, right? It's visual script right now, it has a core design flaws. The main problem is that it's like GDScript, the kind of granularity you get in the operations, but in a very tedious graph-based language where you have to connect like very small operations together. So it's very unproductive at the moment, right? The way it's designed. It needs a much higher level design to be really valuable to people, like you see in the Unreal Engine blueprints or the Bolt language or other visual languages. So it's a matter of reworking the language. It's not how can I say, they don't have to do a new language or something like that. Visual script works and all, but it needs design improvements. It needs a bit of work to be really productive. When that happens, it might be a very good tool for the persons who want to use it. Now, for many developers, often that visual scripting thing can be great if you can interact with it from another language, GDScript or C#. You can create custom nodes for your team. And again, if you're working with a team, it can be amazing because you can make a graph-based quest system or dialogue system just with visual script without having to write a custom editor. And you can save time doing that. As far as GScript versus C#, GScript is still going to be always the main supported language. It's really good that Godot provides options. I would go past C#, but mention someone wants to do high performance code in C++, you can do it through native script. But if someone wants to do, which other popular languages do we have? Rust. There's someone making a game entirely in Rust in Godot. And the options, let's say, they are good for specific persons and cases. The big sell of C# is that there are many, many, many C# developers in game development. Unity developers, of course, but people who really do C# for a living, like who've done 5-10 years of C#, there are tons of them in games because it's not just Unity. Many engines offer C# as their main or one of their main programming languages. So that was that. I think for these persons, it totally makes sense to stick to C#. Anyone who's not a C# developer, I'd recommend GDQuest. For the front, if you want the appeal of C# is for developers who want to kind of do everything with the same language, kind of do high performance gameplay code, and who want to also be able to do some performance optimizations. So they want one language for everything. And Godot has originally that split between front-end language, GDQuest. It's interpreted, it's a bit slow, but you use it for gameplay code and mostly calls backend language, backend code that's fast optimized, written in C++. So if you have a team where you have those skills, gameplay developers and someone who's into C++, for example, that's the combination I would recommend, perhaps.
Very nice. Yeah, probably. I mean, I come from the C# environment, but I tried to learn GDQuest because I kind of realized that that's where the engine is, and yeah, why not try it? And I also knew Python, so that helped a lot.
Yeah.
But in terms of like how the languages behave, they're a little different. GDQuest is more higher level, I would say, than C#, and C# is higher level than C++. That means you don't have to deal with, for example, in C++, you have to deal with memory management. Well, in C# you don't need. And in Python or GDQuest, they're not one of the same. They're different how they're written, but they are very, very similar in how you write them. So yeah, that's also, they're different level of languages. So of course you lose a little customization, but you gain a speed in implementing different features.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, seems people are also. I also wanted to ask you a little about these Kickstarter campaigns. I mean, yeah, for courses are really great for people that are doing courses, but if people know, probably you know Thomas Brashes, all right? Yeah, he did Kickstarters for his games.
Yeah.
And people here that are interested in making games probably are also interested in finding out ways how can they found their games before they're launched or before getting any revenue. So what would be your 3 tips, let's say, to have a successful Kickstarter campaign?
Okay. So I mentioned that Kickstarter is like a pre-sales campaign, right? And that surprises people because they think of it as donations, crowdfunding. Many persons think of it as just supporting a project. The way it works right now, especially when you make games, you have to have a pretty advanced project. You need a slice of gameplay right now to sell on Kickstarter. Maybe a few years ago, you could do with less, with concepts and all. But these days, you need your game to be almost playable when you launch the Kickstarter and to be really representative of what you're going to make. Most campaigns that are successful, especially for indie developers, have a demo for their Kickstarter, right? Or at least they have pretty graphics and those kinds of things. So it's already almost production stuff. And because of that, people, you seduce people with the product, with a game that they would want to buy. And typically they have an extra drive to support the project because it's a game that they really want to see made. And in the communication, you on the campaign, you typically want to stress how much work is involved in there, how much love is put in there, because while it's, I say it's like pre-ordering the game, there's a bit of love and emotions involved that will lead people to supporting you with more money, right? But if you look at the majority of backers on a Kickstarter campaign, basically they pledge for the tier that gives them the game, or the game plus this, or the game plus that, right? Some products. So essentially they are buying a product. pre-ordering very long in advance, but they will get the thing eventually. Other tips, if you want, I don't have specific tips to Kickstarter. The thing of stressing about how much work that is and those kinds of things are important elements in a crowdfunding campaign. So people feel that you really need the budget. They understand, because when people back a game or buy it, they don't understand the costs involved. They don't understand that you need a salary, that you need to pay the bills, that you need to pay your teammates, that you need to pay the artist who's going to work on the game, etc. Right? And that all that has a cost. So they might think, oh, the game will take 1 year. Well, maybe you need to buy a software license and a computer and you need $2,000, right? No, but there's 1 year of work, so I need 1 year of salary, right? So it's more going with the taxes, and you have lots of fees that people don't see, and it's going to be closer to $20, $30, $40, $50,000 that I need, for 1 year to live. Depends entirely on the person's situation, the country they live in. Some countries have very high taxes, cost of living, etc. Right? So that's a very important one. But then in general, you just need to learn to do very good marketing. You need to know your audience very well. So you need to know exactly whom you're making the game for and how to talk to these people, how these person thinks and all. So this is general marketing, right? But maybe in a certain community, you're making a hardcore racing game or something like that. Maybe you want to use jargon from people who love racing, right? So you need to hang out in their communities, show that you're a part of them, that you understand them, and that you understand the kind of game they want to play. Right? I'm taking the racing thing because it might not be the most popular, but it happens all around. And it's the same when making courses and all. There's a lot of focus on audience and all. The bread and butter of marketing and making a product that will sell is people have a problem and you come to solve them. But they have not just a problem they're not aware of. They have a strong problem that they're aware of and that's painful to them. And you come with a solution. When making something like a course, it's very easy. It's like, I want to learn that. There's no course to learn that. You provide the course. When making a game, it can be a bit harder because the problem in question is more an experience that people want to feel. Might not be fully aware of it, right? But you have to understand. You have to read past them to understand what their deeper desire is. I want an experience that makes me connect with people in this or that way. Why do people play FPS or certain kinds of FPS? I want an experience that allows me to feel very good about my skills and competing with others, for example, right? And you have to spend really, that would be the last tip, months preparing your campaign. Like GDQuest campaign, and the reason the 4 have been successful, even back when I was alone, is that I prepared a lot of time in advance. And I talked to people, what are your problems? Okay, you're having this issue and all in the community, right? And seeing how people talk about their problems. It's not just saying, I have an issue with that, but if people say, a thing people say a lot, you've seen here in the chat, is like, lots of tutorials tell me how to do things, but I want to understand why. And that thing is really interesting because the why in question is completely different from person to person. So what they're saying is, I watch tutorials, but I'm missing something that makes me feel I really understood what's happening there. And they basically have a specific question they don't know how to formulate, that you have to anticipate and answer and figure out. And so you see that time and time again. And then the good thing to do to prepare your product is to talk to these persons and say, what do you mean by why? What is the thing that's missing right now? Give me an example from a tutorial you didn't like or something like that. And then they will tell you. And then you start to understand, okay, so there's that general problem. It's not that people want to understand how the computer works or something. There's this specific technical detail. If you don't explain it, they feel like you're not explaining, even if you're explaining other important things, you know. So you have to learn those things, and then you have to put it in your, when you write your page, you have to put all that vocabulary in there. So for example, for courses, having talked with so many persons, I will put something like, you know, you see lots of tutorials who explain how to do things. They give you a recipe, but then you get in front of your game and you don't know how to reapply it. That's because you're missing the why, you know, why they use this approach instead of that other, or things like this. And then people understand that you, or see that you understand them, and that you might be, you know, the right person to provide the experience that they want or the solution that they need. I'm sorry, that was a bit long, but
it's great advice.
it's that you can't explain, you know, a successful Kickstarter is doing good marketing, basically. And good marketing is understanding your people really well, I think.
Yeah, and this advice does not apply only to Kickstarter, but if you want to have like a Steam wish lists campaign and then sell the game, and because people are more focused on just making the game or making the product than providing this end experience for people. And in games, it's I think it's a little more more complex to determine it than, for example, like a course where, okay, this course will provide me this, but a game, what will provide me? I mean, it's a little more, I don't know, hard to put your finger on it, let's say. But really great advice. Okay, yeah, someone said common sense in the, it's definitely.
It's really.
Okay. Yeah. I think we're almost up with the time, but I want to ask you, what do you think Godot in general needs to become a mainstream engine, like real mainstream, like people to put it on the same level as Unity and Unreal? Because right now it seems it lags a little.
Okay, so that is a more difficult one. Depends on what we think with mainstream. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like being used by 10, 20%, 30% of game developers in the game industry at large, like global, something like that. Is this that kind of mainstream you mean? Like being used by...
For example, like let's take Blender's example, because I think Godot follows Blender in Blender steps, let's say. I mean, it was an underground open source tool, and then it just evolved, and now if you go to Blender fund page, you see a lot of big names there, like Microsoft, like Ubisoft, like Unity, I think even. So they, that kind of mainstream level. I think Godot will reach that point, but what would it take to reach it?
I would say, so becoming an industry standard, at least. One thing I want to say, especially for people listening, it's that we often think of the game market, but it's a huge one, and it's made of many smaller markets. So Godot is definitely finding its place little by little. I don't think, unless Godot changes completely, that will ever, for example, be on the same segment as Unreal, for example, really high-end, like next-gen, extremely realistic graphics, insane performance, and those kinds of things. So Godot is not aiming to be in that sphere. I don't think it will anytime soon try to target other industries like architectural visualization, which have, like, a lot of them are using Unreal right now. So they're focusing on graphics and very easy level design and those kinds of things. So first, I'd like to say that. Then it's, it needs many things. One myth that people have in the community is that Godot needs one thing. So very often it needs a game made with Godot that goes extremely popular, that sells millions of copies, and people know it's made with Godot. No, that will not be enough. It will be very beneficial to Godot and its image, but that's not how you become an industry standard, essentially. And even for Blender, it took more than that. Actually, before this kind of game is made, say a AAA game made with Godot that works well, a really famous indie developer who makes very popular games, who takes Godot. These people do risk management, and so they will be waiting for games to prove that they can make in the first place. That mostly work like that. They also are using an engine, and they might be perfectly fine with it, and the cost of switching is really high. If you have a team of 10 persons and you want to switch the team from Unity to Godot, because of what I mentioned before, that you have to pay people salaries, the 6 months to 1 year, they will get to become as efficient with Godot as they were with Unity. Like really knowing all the little advanced things and all, how to organize their game code and avoid technical debt and those kinds of things. They have 5 years of experience with Unity. The cost of switching might be 6 months of salary for 10 persons. Depending on the place, this can represent $500,000. No joke, right? If they are in Los Angeles, for example. So this has, the switch has a real cost. So what happened with Blender is many young professionals years ago started using Blender because the licenses for Autodesk products, which were for the most part leading the industry or the industry standards, and still are in part, started using Blender because it was free. You have to think that in Blender's case, in front of it, there were companies that were charging 5,000 euros or dollars for a single license, right? And you had to pay maybe $1,000 to update every year to the next version, or 500, not sure. But so that played a role in Blender's growth. Now, on any market, there's a bit of a winner takes all kind of law that happens, which is that Unity and Unreal are very dominant, and I don't see Godot getting to the same level of mainstream anytime soon. But it doesn't matter; it doesn't need to. I see it being used by a growing number of companies, thanks to projects like the one you're doing with the GoGodotJam, with content creators talking about it, with people making games about it, with teachers teaching it. It's being used in some K-12 classes in the United States by people who teach programming to kids or teenagers, so they grow up learning Godot rather than another engine, meetups, everything, right? And that's how it goes for open source projects that don't have 1 million to put in marketing to get Godot in front of everyone's eyes, right? So it's very organic, and it will keep being that way. And everything, videos that are popular, people saying that they tried Godot and they like it, and other people see it at all, everything contributes to its popularity, its growth. One thing that I didn't cover here is everything that's on the technical side. On the technical side for 2D, it's already excellent. So there's mostly a lack of games that show that you can really be successful, right? Making commercial games with Godot. So if there was something like an Ori and the Blind Forest for Godot or something like that, that would be, a good wow effect for people. We have some nice games, but we don't have games at that level. What we would call double A 2D games. That is a high budget 2D game, right? With amazing graphics, with 2,000 sprites on the screen, lots of shaders and everything. I think it's definitely possible with Godot, even in its current state. 3D, as Juan says, like probably 4.1, 4.2, like there's a lack of some features still for it to technically become really, really attractive to game developers who have Unity as an alternative, who have an engine that just has more features. So for many persons, the open source aspect is not really a concern. There are persons for whom it is, and they're already interested in Godot. But for many persons, it's not. So they'll be looking at the feature set and be like, okay, they don't need all the features of Unity. That's the important thing. So Godot can get to a point, to a threshold where people are just like, yeah, okay, it has everything I need. It's great. Actually, it doesn't have all the things I don't need from the Unreal Engine. So it will be simpler to learn and simpler to use, simpler to wrap my head around Godot, so I might use it. Very long answers, and long story short is it's complicated. It's going to take time. Godot already found its place, because we have to say, like in jams and all, it's often like the third most used engine. So it's maybe easily at the use level of a company like GameMaker. And you have to consider that a company like GameMaker, I think they do $10 million a year in revenue, right? So Godot with very little, with the little funding, little money, and the power of the community, is managing to get as popular as something like GameMaker and grow as fast with way less.
Or maybe, or maybe surpass it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But it's
who
just to
knows?
say, in any case, I think like
Yeah.
at least the Godot will find its place. I totally see it. Well, in gambling, it's already in use for licensing reasons, because gambling licenses for video games are for game engines are extremely expensive. Like Unity is free, but if you do gambling, it might cost you an arm. It really costs huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
But in other cases, so there's that difference with Blender, which is that many persons care a lot more about the free, as in cost zero money, right? As in other things. And you can get started with Unity and Unreal for free. And even if you have a cost that comes eventually, for people who learn an engine, spend 2 years with it, and all, might not be a concern. When people go, another thing I didn't mention is the schools. Like, I don't think the universities will start covering Godot until there's a job market. The demand from the market needs to come first, because some people think, having Godot in schools would be a way to create a job market. But no, universities won't cover Godot until there are lots of jobs for it, because universities or game schools, they work directly with game studios, asking them, okay, do you take my students as interns? Will you hire my students? I have a very good one. No, and that's how they get the high employment rate, which they are aiming for when people come out of the school. So you need the jobs first, and you need the companies who can hire their students first.
Yeah, and speaking about the students and schools, last week I did a students game play session with a teacher from the United States, and he opted for Godot to teach his students. So it's happening. It's happening already.
Yeah.
And I'll actually put that link into the chat page. But yeah, some schools and the reason, one of the reasons actually, was the fact that the school gave all of the students Chromebooks, and Godot was the only engine that worked in browser.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like that functionality, when it appeared for me, I said, "Well, who's going to use that?" No, it's actually some people. There's a niche there that people cannot use something else. Like in a Chromebook, you don't have any other option. So it's things are starting to happening, and I have like really high expectations of the future of Godot.
Yeah, it's really successful already, right? So it's all those things. I see someone in chat saying, we need more publishers who can port the games to consoles. Those things will happen little by little. There's a limited number of Godot developers who make in commercial games with enough budgets or enough experience that they would want to port, or they can, have a publisher port the game to consoles and all. On that note, I want to say that very often console ports of games, or very often, often enough, they are not done with the engine people use to make the games. So that's not necessarily a worry. If the game is successful, made with Godot, you can approach about any publisher, and there are developers who specialize in remaking games with a technology that's specific for the console and optimized and all. So you can give them the source code in Godot, and they will translate everything to another engine. And many very popular games like Super Meat Boy, or is it The Binding of Isaac? I think both were ported like that with people remaking the game in different technologies, right?
Yeah.
So this is already a thing.
Yeah, and also I think this console exporting. I've been a couple of years ago to Nordic Game Conference, and I've heard. I was talking with someone that actually managed the team of people working on porting games. So it's not actually the developers, but they send it to a third party team, and it's a full-time job for a lot of people porting stuff. They ported Saints Row the Third on Nintendo Switch, and he explained me the process. Of course, different engine and stuff, but it's quite complex. People just think, oh, it's just a button, you hit publish on Xbox, or and you have it, but it's not like that at all. I mean,
Very complicated.
that you do that in the. I mean, that's the first thing you do, as he mentioned. But then, okay, FPS are really low, and you start to like optimize and remove stuff, and yeah, it's a full-time job for a lot of people. So, and I think if it's a successful game, it can be done. I don't know, Valheim, for example, was only on Steam and a couple of PC stores, and that was it. And yeah, it just worked. So I think just going to the consoles, yeah, it's a concern, but I don't think it's the most important.
No, it's not a big concern, especially as there are already two publishers actually porting games to Godot. The Godot co-founder, like co-developer, original, has a company, Ariel Manzour, and there's Pineapple Works, who's a Polish publisher, and they do console ports. I think the options are limited. So as Danilo is saying, this is Switch and PS4. And for Xbox consoles, there's the Universal Windows ports technology. I think it's called like that, that Godot supports. But so, yeah, I've seen PS Vita as well before, so handheld as well. I don't know about the Nintendo handheld consoles, but yeah, so there are definitely options. But again, it's the people who port your game, even for AAA games, right? You might think sometimes they even have the people in-house, but it's a complete team working on that console.
Yeah, also some consoles do have their own specific hardware things, and you have to learn them. And yeah, it's a lot of work. It's not just one button press, as people think.
Yeah.
So, what would be one final advice you'd want to give to the people that are live in chat and people that will see this replay?
What can we find that is useful? Okay, maybe one thing, if you want to make a living working in games, so it's not for people who just want to make their game as a hobby. You want to make a game for yourself as a hobby, for your friends, do whatever you want. The thing I talked about with the Kickstarter, how to make a successful Kickstarter, that you have to talk to your audience, you have to learn to understand the people, how they think, how they talk, and communicate in a way they feel you will create the experience they want. Well, you have to apply that to developing the game as well, if you want some professional success. So many game developers don't create, like professionals, don't create the games that they want to play, right? They put a bit of that in it, a bit of their personality and spirit, but they also talk a ton with the players to understand what the players like and want and the kind of experience they would like to have, which might not be, what exactly you want as the creator. Of course, there's a whole branch of, again, you're doing it as a hobby, or you want to engage in games as an art form where you want to express yourself in a certain way. Of course, create whatever you want, but don't expect to make any money from it, right? And if you want to make a living off of it, then it's trickier. You have to do the whole marketing thing. You have to make an experience that people care about, that they want to dive in, and you have to communicate this very well, right? So that would be it.
Yeah, that's a great advice, and I think a lot of people, if you take them one by one, they'll say this is like their dream job to work, make their own games. So yeah, this is a really good starting point. Of course, you need to build on top of that, but it's the main driver. Like if you want to have success in this and
Yeah.
in any industry for that matter.
I would add that, yeah, as a
Okay.
dream job, working in games it seems very appealing. It can be nice, but you have to try it as well. Like any job, you have to try to see if it's for you, because the day job is not necessarily, it's not like what you imagine at first, right? Especially lots of people want to go indie because they start to understand that if you work at a studio, you might be doing there are some studios you go work as a designer and you're doing Excel spreadsheets all day, because you're balancing values or things like these. So you have to be very conscious of that. But then when you work on the game as a professional, you have to consider that you need to do all the tedious parts. If you want to be indie in particular, you have to do all the business stuff. You have to handle the taxes, you have to handle the marketing, of course, but negotiations with publishers, legal side, lots of things. I've had a little game studio with a friend years ago, and that was my first job and my first company. And we're trying to make an indie game, and we discovered that, yeah, even in the team, like, we're young, and our vision started to differ during development. And it was going to take a lot more time than we thought. Like, we lacked the experience to ship a game in 6 months. So it was going to take 3 times that, right? And it was problematic. So we ended up doing mobile games in HTML5, JavaScript, and those kinds of things, and selling them to publishers. And that's what made us money at the time, right? So our indie game project that was really risky was not going to pay the bills, and we had to do these kinds of small games to do that. And there was a lot of it that you have to learn to go through, which was talking with the publishers that were nice, but having to wait 6 months to go through the whole process of sending the game, going to the QA team, waiting for a long time for them to get back to you, fixing things because they test on that old Samsung Galaxy S2 mobile phone and has horrible graphic drivers. So you have to make a hack from it, and you have to send it back. And it took 6 months we finished the game, it worked, we tested it on some devices, and then just every month having to make a small change that would get back to you. Shipping to consoles is like that as well, as far as I know from other people. It's that they go through publishers, because working with the game console manufacturer and their QA team, like, you have a long list of things that you have to, the UI should be a bit offset from the top, and like that many pixels or that many units to work on these kinds of TV frames and all. You have to do tons of things like that. So yeah, the job is sometimes not what you think it is. So it's always good to try if you can, right? And to try the job.
Yeah.
Before engaging for a full career in games. I would say, I say that because, for example, personally, I ended up doing education because the kinds of games I wanted to do are not commercially viable. And I wanted to do something like sharing with people very short experiences that people would enjoy, but that they would not pay for because they are too short, like very polished 5-minute games. Imagine that, spending 3 months, 6 months on a 5-minute game. That's the kind of stuff I wanted and would like to do. And so the next best thing was to share with people in a different way. So with education, giving them access to things for free whenever possible. It's not always possible because of the cost of production, but yeah, helping lots of people, get into game development.
Yeah, that's really great. It's really interesting, how you found this opportunity to still make games but also have a living, because otherwise you would have been stuck in a job with very limited time, and yeah, could not even make the 5-minute games. But yeah, there's one question probably
Yep.
if you can. So what kind of games did you want to make?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. There was now what game would be really interesting. Basically, I wanted to do more something that's more like research and development in games. So initially, I had that thing of philosophical messages. I can give you one example. I remember with a friend who wanted to make a series of games that are like it's not even it's an interactive experience where it's like a haiku. You take a haiku, so one of these Japanese poems that are one sentence, and you make a scene that you can play that captures the essence of that thing. So very perhaps artistic in nature, like capturing something that is because haikus and the let's say Japanese culture in that case is very unless you spend a lot of time learning the culture, it's not something you can grasp very easily, even translated in our languages, right? And especially when you speak the language and a native explains it to you, it's like, oh, okay, so that doesn't mean what I thought at all. For some of them, and they might think in ways we don't think. We can't think in the West. They have words and concepts that exist in the language that we don't have in the West, but that perhaps you can capture with a playable experience, right? So that you can understand intuitively. That would be one example. But making just one scene for one haiku is like you might spend weeks on it, and then it's 30 seconds, 1 minute to get it. So you get a sense for that. What could that be? I would say the general case is that when you make commercial games, they need to be very long. And I remember a game project we had that was about certain game feel and those kinds of things, like going frenetic more and more. But the thing is, my teammate was sold on the idea, were pretty happy about it, but then he was like, what about the duration of the game? And I said, well, the main story run, I mean, we can stretch it to 1 hour, but the ideal length would be 10 minutes, right? So the idea is to have that game where the feeling gets more and more hectic as you go. And there's a particular reason for it, but it goes to extremes to see how far you can push the pace and the sensations of the game and get the person in the game world. So that would be experimentation on our end to see how far we could push. But the thing is, to sell the game, what we needed, it would be essentially a runner game, infinite runner. So finite runner, of course, but to make the game commercial, it was completely viable, but we would have needed extra runs and challenges through the game and probably a procedurally generated infinite runner. As a side, so you would have the story with big air quotes, right? You would have the main experience, that is the intended experience, and we would have had to make the 10 hours of gameplay, for example, through an infinite runner where you completely lose the point. And so many games are like that actually, and it's completely fine. There are entertainment, so they remix existing gameplay with a story, all those kinds of things, but because to make something new, it's not commercially viable. We can hardly do it. If you make something that is going to be too short for people, even if the experience is great, you can't even sell it $5, right? Because people people come with certain expectations, and if you don't meet them, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So and people a lot of times underestimate how much time you have to put into making that content for the game.
Yeah. If it lasts 10 minutes, they expect that. The thing is, when people see a AAA game, and even if you tell them, oh, this game, 500 persons worked on it, and there were 100 persons full-time for 5 years, right? And then you're alone, and they don't think about the gap in man hours. They don't think about, okay, so to make a very long game like that, you need to put, let's say, 15,000 man days. You need to put more than a lifetime of work hours, right, into this game to make it, because you have the team. It's multiplied by the number of persons in the team, and it's like, so if I want to make an amazing experience being solo, it's going to take me 1 year, and then you can play it for 5 minutes or something like that. If you really want to, again, the point here is, if you really wanted to get only the essence of some kinds of games, because there are many games like mobile. So there are some very short experiences, small games that are very nice. I played a game called Gun Rounds a few days ago, and so it's a procedurally generated shooter, but it has that mechanic where everything revolves around a bullet. And so you use the same mechanic for everything. You get cards that are random weapons, and you can fire like that. But the core of the game you can experience in 1 minute, right? And so all the extra duration is for entertainment. It kills time in a good way. It's a really nice game. But so there are things to unlock. There's a lot of stuff, like there are many different weapons to try, but you're not sure to get them. So you have to make many runs to see all the weapons and experience them, and see which ones you like the most, etc. You have random items and those kinds of things to make the experience long. You could have that game not procedurally generated, with a very, very tight experience that lasts 5 minutes, and you would really get the most value for your time, let's say, as the player. But that's not how people see it, of course, because they go to games for longer entertainment. Like people watch series, they might want to spend 5 hours of their time having fun.
Yeah. But there are some games like I really enjoy factory games, which they tell you the basic mechanics like in 5 minutes, but then it just it gets complex and complex and complex, and this can propagate in a lot of hours.
Absolutely. So I don't mean to say there are no games like that. There are no games, like there are games that can be very long, but that can also be amazing. So all the building games can be great as well, the simulation and those kinds of things, or even again, I was only talking about a personal thing I would like to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean to say that the games that exist don't have a reason to exist, or that they are poor. But at the same time, what I would say there is, you take for example, MMORPGs. There are tons of them. Like, there's really a place for that kind of experience. Since Dark Age of Camelot or the Fourth Prophecy to these days Final Fantasy XIV, the latest World of Warcraft, and those kinds of things. But those kinds of games, there are tons of them. There are really tons of MMORPGs from Korea, or those things. Many you've never heard about, but if you really look, there's an overwhelming amount of games like that you couldn't play. So that's mostly the point. It's like working in games, I would have liked to do something that, it's not that there is none of it either, but there is a limited amount of people working on that. But unfortunately, it was not commercially viable. But I find the games where you experiment are really great, even if very long. So you could say Factorio, Opus Magnum, those kinds of games. I quite like the Zachtronic games about programming, like how is it called? The hacking. There's a hacking game that basically teaches you assembly language. It's a fake assembly language, but it's like the real one. So you write instructions, like you code, and it makes little bots move, and you're hacking
That's great.
whatever you'll do. Yeah, and so it teaches you the spirit of hacking, because you have to print a Zine, like a magazine, and you can fold, and basically you have the manual, and it teaches you things. So you can play the game and you take your Zine. It's like, oh, this instruction works like that, all those kinds. So you test the code in a game way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we're approaching the end. So
yeah, sorry, I was talking a lot.
Yeah, no problem. It's really great. I think people here got a lot of value the discussion, and I also will try to put on chapters for all of the questions so that you can easily go back to this video and go through all of them. So what I want to say, Nathan, thanks a lot for accepting this invitation for the interview. And
thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for all the tips that you shared with the people in the community, and hopefully in other communities as well, not only for Godot. Maybe we're converting someone here. I don't know, but
Fingers crossed.
It has been a really great time, and I'm looking forward for the next interview because people are already asking this in the chat. Okay, so if that said, I'll switch quickly to the final screen. So thank you all for joining, and don't forget to go to GoGodotJam.com if you want to enter the competition. If not, you can just check out what we have in the program section. We have a lot of cool stuff already made by creators. We are putting even more stuff right now as the jam goes on, and we'll do some after jam work as well. So thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.